was in the shower. My name is Brenda, a 38-year-old woman who always believed I had complete control over the safety of my own home. I was just walking past the kitchen island when the glowing screen caught my attention with a deeply disturbing message. The notification clearly displayed the words, "We'll start when your sister leaves the house." A sudden chill ran down my spine because I was the only sister currently living under this roof. I immediately picked up the phone and unlocked it using the passcode I had accidentally discovered a few days earlier. Without overthinking the potentially dangerous consequences, I quickly typed a direct reply, "Come over." She left about 5 minutes ago. Then I carefully placed the phone back in its exact original position before quietly retreating to the darkest corner of my living room sofa. 30 minutes later, the piercing sound of the doorbell shattered the heavy silence, marking the beginning of a nightmare that completely destroyed my understanding of family loyalty. If you want to find out who was standing behind that door, waiting to steal everything I owned. A few months before this terrible incident occurred, my sister Shannon suddenly appeared on my front porch in the middle of the night, looking incredibly exhausted. She was loudly dragging 2 heavily worn suitcases across the concrete while firmly holding the hand of my 12-year-old nephew Tyler. Shannon immediately began crying hysterically the second I unlocked the door, speaking so rapidly that I could barely comprehend her frantic explanations regarding her current, miserable situation. She dramatically explained how her corporate employer had recently executed a massive staff reduction program that resulted in her sudden and completely unexpected unemployment. According to her tearful story, her strict landlord had ruthlessly kicked them out onto the dark streets that very evening because she had absolutely no money left in her bank account to pay the overdue monthly rent. I stood firmly blocking the entryway with my arms crossed over my chest, feeling a profound sense of hesitation about letting her step inside my secure home. I knew perfectly well that Shannon possessed a notoriously dark history, filled with endless partying, reckless spending habits, and a severe gambling addiction that had ruined all her past relationships. She had never been willing to hold down a stable career for more than a few consecutive months to properly support herself or establish a secure future for her growing child. The harsh words of absolute rejection were already forming on the tip of my tongue when I instinctively looked down at Tyler standing quietly in the freezing cold shadows. The young boy had a terrifyingly pale face with exhausted eyes that reflected a deep sense of fear regarding their terrifying homeless situation. He was shivering slightly in his thin jacket while clutching a small blue backpack that likely contained all his remaining personal belongings in this world. A sudden wave of overwhelming sympathy instantly shattered my initial logical reasoning and forced me to completely reconsider my defensive stance against my highly unreliable sibling. I simply could not abandon an innocent child to sleep on the dangerous city streets or in a dirty public shelter just because his mother was an incredibly irresponsible person. I finally released a heavy sigh of defeat and stepped aside to allow both of them to enter my warm house from the chilling night air. Shannon rushed inside while dragging the heavy luggage across my clean hardwood floors, constantly mumbling fragmented sentences of gratitude that sounded entirely rehearsed to strategically manipulate my emotions. I closed the front door behind them while securely locking the deadbolt, already feeling a massive burden settling onto my shoulders regarding this sudden and highly inconvenient living arrangement. Once they were safely standing inside the brightly lit hallway, I immediately walked toward the hall closet to gather some spare blankets and pillows for the night. I quickly arranged a temporary sleeping area for them on the large living room sofa, while trying to process the chaotic reality of my newly disrupted peaceful life. "You can stay here temporarily until you figure things out, but you must actively search for employment every single day," I told Shannon using a very stern voice to establish my strict boundaries right from the very beginning. "Thank you so much, Brenda. I promise I will submit job applications tomorrow morning and pay you back for your generous hospitality as soon as possible," she replied while wiping away her magically fading tears. I silently nodded at her seemingly desperate words, because I had heard those exact same empty promises countless times throughout our turbulent adult lives together. I then turned my attention directly toward Tyler to offer him a comforting smile and asked if he wanted me to warm up some leftover chicken in the microwave. The boy quietly shook his head to decline my offer, before politely thanking me for letting them stay in my comfortable living room instead of freezing outside in the dangerous neighborhood. I instructed them exactly where the guest bathroom was located and provided some fresh towels so they could properly clean up after their supposedly traumatic eviction process. As I finally walked back down the long hallway toward my own master bedroom, a lingering sense of deep suspicion began creeping into my exhausted mind regarding her real motives. I knew Shannon was incredibly manipulative whenever she needed financial assistance or a free place to crash after burning all her other personal bridges with our extended family members. I firmly promised myself right then and there that I would keep a very close eye on every single move Shannon made while she was living under my protective roof. I mentally resolved to lock away all my important financial documents, emergency cash, and valuable jewelry first thing in the morning to protect myself from any potential theft. I completely refused to let my natural empathy for Tyler become a dangerous vulnerability that his deceitful mother could eventually exploit to steal my hard-earned assets for her destructive habits. A few days after they stepped into my house, a highly disturbing pattern of secretive behavior began to emerge from the unwanted guest currently sleeping in my living room. Shannon started conducting these strange, exploratory walks around my private living spaces whenever she thought my attention was completely diverted toward household chores. She seemed particularly obsessed with the specific layout of my personal home office, situated at the very end of the main hallway. Her wandering eyes constantly gravitated toward the far right corner of that room, where a heavy metal wall safe was securely installed behind a large landscape painting. I caught her lingering near the doorway on multiple occasions, while blatantly pretending to admire the decorative crown molding running along the upper ceiling. This deeply unsettling curiosity inevitably bled into our daily interactions during the highly uncomfortable evening meals we shared together around the small kitchen table. Instead of discussing her supposed daily efforts to secure a new job, Shannon frequently initiated highly intrusive conversations regarding my personal financial status and banking habits. She constantly threw out probing questions explicitly designed to uncover the exact numerical figures of my current corporate salary and the total balance of my emergency savings accounts. Her aggressive interrogations also extended to my professional calendar, as she persistently demanded to know the precise dates and durations of my upcoming out-of-town business trips. During one particularly tense Thursday evening dinner, while Tyler was quietly picking at his mashed potatoes, she decided to push her manipulative luck even further into dangerous territory. "Do you keep a lot of cash in that safe because the security around this neighborhood seems a bit unstable lately?" Shannon casually asked while intensely studying my facial reaction. "Not much, mostly just work documents," I coldly replied without looking up from my plate, before deliberately continuing to eat my meal to firmly shut down the interrogation. That firm dismissal unfortunately did not deter her from escalating the sheer absurdity of her deceptive tactics the very next morning before I left for the corporate office. While I was pouring my morning coffee standing next to the kitchen sink, Shannon aggressively volunteered to take over the primary management of my daily household security protocols. She completely crossed the line of basic decency by actively requesting a permanent copy of my house keys to supposedly protect my valuable property whenever I was physically absent. She desperately tried to disguise this incredibly brazen demand as a generous attempt to contribute some meaningful effort in exchange for the free room and board I was currently providing. I immediately rejected her ridiculous proposal by explicitly stating that my current electronic security system was perfectly adequate without requiring any additional human intervention from an unemployed house guest. My simmering suspicions ultimately reached an absolute boiling point when her covert daily surveillance suddenly transformed into blatant attempts at stealing my secure access credentials. Over the course of a single weekend, I managed to catch Shannon lurking in the shadows of the dark hallway on at least 3 separate occasions. Every single time I needed to retrieve an important client contract from the hidden wall safe, I could clearly see her sneaky reflection in the glass cabinet doors directly across the room. She was practically leaning her entire upper body around the wooden doorframe, while aggressively squinting her eyes to memorize the exact rotational sequence of the mechanical combination dial. The undeniable realization that she was actively planning to breach my secure storage unit forced me into taking immediate defensive countermeasures to permanently protect my hard-earned financial assets. Waiting patiently until both of my house guests were completely fast asleep that night, I silently crept back into my dimly lit home office without making a single sound. The meticulous process of recalibrating the complex internal locking mechanism took nearly an hour to establish an entirely new numerical passcode that she could never possibly guess or duplicate. This disturbing revelation simultaneously forced me to upgrade my overall mental state to maximum vigilance regarding every single suspicious movement that untrustworthy woman made while living under my protective roof. There was absolutely no denying the grim reality that my own flesh and blood was methodically plotting to rob me blind the moment a highly vulnerable opportunity presented itself. A rare free afternoon finally arrived during the weekend, providing a much-needed psychological break from my highly demanding corporate schedule. I decided to sit quietly on the shaded front porch, where Tyler was currently occupying a wooden rocking chair with a deeply troubled posture. The young boy maintained an incredibly sorrowful facial expression while continuously crumpling the bottom hem of his faded t-shirt using his noticeably trembling fingers. He deliberately avoided making any direct eye contact with me throughout our prolonged initial silence, acting exactly as if he were carrying the heavy burden of a massive, unsaid secret. Recognizing his obvious emotional distress immediately, I gently initiated a casual conversation about his personal interests to carefully lower his deeply entrenched defensive barriers. After sensing his lingering hesitation regarding his mother, I completely changed the gloomy atmosphere by actively inviting Tyler to accompany me to the large shopping mall located across town. My primary intention was to purchase some desperately needed winter clothes for him before treating the hungry boy to a large bucket of his absolute favorite crispy fried chicken at the busy food court. We spent several pleasant hours browsing through various retail stores to properly find fitting jeans plus warm sweaters that instantly brought a faint spark of joy back to his pale face. Sitting directly across from each other at the noisy restaurant table later that afternoon, the genuine warmth alongside the unconditional kindness I consistently projected finally shattered his fragile emotional walls. Tyler simply could not maintain the deceptive facade his mother had ruthlessly forced upon him for another single minute, suddenly bursting into uncontrollable tears right over his completely untouched plate of food. The surrounding customers briefly glanced toward our booth, out of sheer curiosity, prompting me to slide over to his side of the table to provide a comforting physical presence. "Aunt Brenda, you have to lock your safe tightly, because my mom is lying about everything, since she actually owes a lot of money from losing at gambling." Tyler sobbed uncontrollably while aggressively wiping his wet cheeks. "Calm down, Tyler. I promise to resolve this smoothly, so you definitely do not need to be afraid anymore." I firmly responded while reaching across the table to grasp his shaking hands tightly. Taking several deep breaths to successfully stabilize his cracking voice, the frightened child proceeded to systematically dismantle every single fabricated lie Shannon had confidently told me on my front porch. Tyler explicitly revealed the shocking truth that Shannon had never been terminated by her previous corporate employer during any supposed departmental staff reduction program. She had deliberately submitted her voluntary resignation several months ago, simply to spend her entire waking existence squandering her monthly paychecks inside illegal underground casinos. Her crippling gambling addiction quickly generated massive financial debts, owed directly to extremely dangerous individuals operating within the city, which ultimately forced their angry landlord to legally evict them from the rental property, due to countless months of completely unpaid rent. The terrified boy practically begged me to permanently secure my personal financial assets, because he explicitly knew his mother was actively hunting for a highly profitable target to settle her gambling debts. Hearing this devastating confirmation directly from her own biological child plunged me into a state of profound contemplation regarding my currently vulnerable living situation. I sat there silently piecing together his urgent warning with those deeply disturbing surveillance activities Shannon had been consistently conducting around my locked home office over the past few days. The disgusting reality that she was actively utilizing her own innocent son as a sympathetic shield to successfully infiltrate my home before robbing me blind finally became undeniably clear in my mind. I internally promised to protect this vulnerable child from his toxic environment, while simultaneously preparing myself to completely destroy the malicious scheme his mother was plotting against my secure household. That particular night, the atmosphere inside my usually peaceful house became so suffocatingly quiet that every single physical movement seemed significantly magnified. I quietly stepped out of my secure master bedroom to grab a refreshing glass of cold water from the kitchen located straight down the main hallway. Approaching the dimly lit living room area, I accidentally overheard a frantic whispering voice, echoing clearly through the slightly ajar door of the temporary guest quarters. Shannon was actively engaged in a highly secretive cellular phone conversation with an unknown individual regarding a deeply disturbing criminal operation targeting my personal sanctuary. She was meticulously discussing specific logistical details about executing a calculated robbery inside my property at some point within the upcoming couple of days. The primary objective of their sinister discussion revolved entirely around accessing my hidden wall safe whenever I physically left the premises for my daily corporate duties. "Listen, we have to do this quickly, because whenever that girl leaves the house, you bring the tools immediately," Shannon whispered urgently over the phone. The sheer shock of actually hearing my biological relative maliciously plotting to rob me blind caused my exhausted legs to instinctively stumble backward into the dark corridor. My blindly flailing right hand unfortunately collided directly with a small decorative ceramic vase resting precariously upon a narrow wooden display shelf. The fragile decorative object plummeted straight toward the solid hardwood floor below, creating a deafening crash that violently shattered the heavy midnight silence. "Damn it!" I cursed silently, as the sharp ceramic shards scattered violently everywhere under my bare feet across the smooth floorboards. The secretive murmuring coming from the guest room ceased instantly, quickly replaced by a terrifyingly tense stillness echoing throughout the entire residential structure. Knowing Shannon was probably listening closely from her makeshift bed, I immediately began loudly sweeping the broken fragments into a nearby plastic dustpan. I deliberately muttered several frustrated complaints aloud about my own ridiculous clumsiness while attempting to get a midnight drink in the dark. My impromptu acting performance seemingly convinced the deceitful woman hiding inside that my disruptive presence was merely a harmless coincidence rather than a calculated eavesdropping session. After safely disposing of the hazardous debris in the kitchen trash bin, I quickly retreated to the absolute security of my locked bedroom to fully process this horrifying revelation. Early the following morning, a powerful sense of burning paranoia compelled me to conduct a highly thorough inventory of my valuable personal belongings. Opening my velvet jewelry box resting on the wooden vanity table, I experienced another sickening wave of absolute betrayal coursing through my veins. I was absolutely horrified upon discovering that my highly expensive designer wristwatch had vanished completely from its designated compartment without leaving a single trace behind. There was absolutely no logical explanation for the suddenly missing valuable item other than the undeniable fact that Shannon had already started casually looting my property. She was actively exploiting my generous hospitality while comfortably living under my protective roof to systematically steal my hard-earned luxury possessions. Despite the burning anger dangerously threatening to consume my rational thoughts, I consciously decided to remain completely silent about the stolen jewelry piece for the time being. Confronting her right now over a single missing fashion accessory would only alert the scheming woman to my mounting suspicions regarding her overall deceptive behavior. A premature accusation would permanently ruin my strategic advantage against her impending major heist, targeting the substantial cash reserves hidden inside my home office wall safe. I firmly resolved to patiently wait in the shadows to gather undeniable concrete evidence of her criminal conspiracy involving that mysterious individual on the phone. My ultimate goal was to ensure she could never possibly escape the severe legal consequences of her malicious actions once the authorities became officially involved. The following morning, I drove my vehicle straight into the bustling heart of the downtown commercial district. Parking near a sleek office building, I immediately sought out my best friend, Andrea, an incredibly experienced private investigator, specializing in complex financial fraud cases alongside comprehensive background verifications. She had spent over a decade building a flawless reputation for uncovering deeply hidden secrets that ordinary law enforcement agencies often overlooked during their initial preliminary inquiries. Sitting across her polished wooden desk, I provided her with the unknown cellular number discreetly copied from Shannon's mobile device, plus all the disturbing details regarding those massive gambling debts. Handing over the hastily scribbled digits on a torn piece of paper, I carefully explained my terrifying suspicions regarding the imminent threat directed toward my hidden wall safe. I explicitly requested a thorough investigation into the complete criminal history of the mysterious individual secretly communicating with the deceptive woman currently living inside my home. Taking the provided information very seriously, the skilled investigator immediately began typing the numerical sequence into her highly restricted proprietary database to initiate the digital tracking process. Navigating through the heavy afternoon traffic later that exact same day felt like an absolute eternity, while my racing mind constantly envisioned various disastrous scenarios involving my compromised home security. A highly urgent phone call summoned me back to the investigative agency for an immediate in-person briefing regarding the shocking newly discovered evidence. Andrea gravely placed a thick manila folder directly onto the table, verbally confirming a truly disgusting reality that perfectly matched the terrifying verbal warning previously provided by Tyler during our emotional conversation at the restaurant. The comprehensive financial documents explicitly proved Shannon had aggressively liquidated every single valuable personal asset she possessed to temporarily appease the ruthless underground casino operators. The bank statements meticulously gathered by the private detective revealed numerous massive cash withdrawals occurring simultaneously alongside the pawn shop receipts for her previously expensive jewelry collection. Furthermore, the detailed surveillance records exposed her highly suspicious romantic relationship with her new boyfriend, Travis, who was officially identified as the registered owner of that mysterious phone number. You must be extremely careful, Brenda, because Travis is a professional scammer possessing 2 prior convictions for major property theft, Andrea stated firmly while tapping her index finger against the thick criminal file. I am fully aware of the situation, so I absolutely will not let them loot a single penny from my secure household, I coldly replied while maintaining an incredibly piercing stare. Thoroughly reviewing the alarming official police reports enclosed within the investigative dossier, I discovered his extensive criminal background contained multiple felony charges spanning across several different jurisdictions. The official legal records clearly illustrated his preferred operational methodology heavily involved conducting illegal residential home invasions, targeting wealthy individuals possessing substantial amounts of unsecured cash reserves. The attached mugshots displayed a heavily tattooed man with a hardened facial expression, visually confirming the dangerous nature of the criminal element my untrustworthy relative had foolishly brought into my life. Absorbing the severe gravity of this impending physical threat, I carefully requested several printed copies of the official arrest warrants to utilize as undeniable concrete evidence for my upcoming confrontation. Armed with this incredibly damning intelligence portfolio, I finally possessed the necessary legal leverage to permanently destroy their malicious conspiracy before they could successfully breach my fortified office. The time for passive observation had officially concluded because I was now actively preparing to orchestrate a devastating trap utilizing their own greedy overconfidence against them. Leaving the secure private investigation office with the crucial documents safely tucked inside my leather briefcase, my previous feelings of familial sympathy were permanently replaced by a ruthless determination for absolute justice. That particular evening, the inevitable climax of this treacherous situation finally arrived, while Shannon was occupying the guest bathroom for a remarkably long shower. Her cellular device suddenly began vibrating aggressively across the smooth kitchen counter, capturing my immediate attention as the illuminated screen displayed a highly incriminating message notification. Quickly unlocking the device using the memorized passcode, I was absolutely stunned to discover an extensive chat history, meticulously detailing their sinister conspiracy. The digital conversation explicitly outlined their calculated plan to hire a professional locksmith to forcefully breach my hidden wall safe the moment I vacated the premises. Reviewing those vile digital messages officially confirmed my absolute worst fears regarding her complete lack of basic human morality toward her own family members. Utilizing my own personal smartphone, I rapidly captured multiple high-resolution photographs of the entire text exchange to permanently preserve the undeniable concrete evidence for the investigating authorities. Seizing the perfect opportunity to orchestrate their ultimate downfall, I actively typed a deceptive response directly to the unknown number, "Come over immediately since she left the house about 5 minutes ago." Immediately after sending that fatal trap message, I dialed the local police emergency hotline to provide my exact residential address alongside a detailed description of the impending burglary attempt. I calmly explained the highly dangerous situation to the emergency dispatcher while mentally preparing myself to properly confront the hostile criminals directly inside my own home. The seasoned dispatch operator instructed me to remain perfectly calm inside the residence, while several patrol units silently approached my neighborhood with their emergency sirens completely deactivated. I confidently assured the operator regarding my physical position before quietly returning the borrowed cellular device to its original resting place on the wet kitchen counter. Exactly 30 agonizing minutes later, the piercing sound of the front doorbell echoed loudly throughout the hallway, followed quickly by several aggressive knocks against the solid wooden frame. I remained completely motionless upon my comfortable living room armchair, deliberately allowing a highly panicked Shannon to rush frantically toward the entryway while hastily wrapped in a damp bath towel. Pulling the heavy door open, her previously flushed complexion instantly turned a ghostly shade of pale upon discovering Travis standing on the front porch alongside a stranger holding a heavy tool bag. A heated verbal altercation immediately erupted between the two conspirators because the frustrated criminal genuinely believed Shannon had prematurely authorized their illegal infiltration operation. "Why did you text me to come over if you haven't handled everything yet?" Travis snapped aggressively outside the open doorway. "I sent that message myself, plus the police just arrived right on time to hear you criminals arguing." I coldly spoke up while stepping out directly from behind Shannon. Realizing the catastrophic reality of their compromised situation, Travis, alongside the hired locksmith, instantly pivoted toward the driveway in a desperate attempt to successfully escape the severe legal consequences. The flashing red lights from the police cruiser suddenly illuminated the dark residential street, completely surrounding the trapped criminals with overwhelming law enforcement numbers. Their frantic flight was abruptly terminated by multiple armed police officers swarming the front lawn, quickly subduing both trespassing suspects before securing metallic handcuffs around their wrists. Shannon immediately collapsed onto the front porch tiles, in absolute hysterics, desperately weeping while feeding the arresting officers pathetic lies about having absolutely zero connection to the apprehended burglars. Her pathetic attempts at forcefully denying any criminal involvement were suddenly destroyed when Tyler bravely stepped out from his dark bedroom into the chaotic, illuminated hallway. The courageous young boy raised his trembling right arm, pointing directly toward the exact location where his deceitful mother had secretly hidden my stolen wristwatch underneath the living room sofa cushions. Witnessing her own biological child officially testify against her malicious actions finally shattered her fake innocent facade, leaving her utterly speechless while the officers read her the Miranda rights. 4 months later, the heavy wooden gavel of the presiding judge echoed loudly across the silent courtroom to officially conclude this devastating familial ordeal following a highly stressful trial period. Travis, alongside the deceptively hired locksmith, received exceptionally severe state prison sentences for their calculated conspiracy to commit organized residential burglary against my secure private property. The definitive judicial ruling permanently terminated their illicit criminal freedoms while ensuring they could not legally terrorize any other innocent suburban homeowners for several consecutive years. Watching the uniformed bailiffs escort the handcuffed men away provided an immense sense of closure regarding the terrifying physical threat they previously posed toward my household. Sitting directly across the crowded courtroom, Shannon miraculously avoided direct incarceration by receiving a lengthy suspended sentence under extremely strict probationary conditions mandated by the reviewing magistrate. However, her newly established permanent criminal record completely destroyed any remaining professional credibility she previously possessed within the competitive corporate employment sector. She was officially evicted from my peaceful neighborhood by a strict judicial restraining order, forcing her to immediately relocate into a severely cramped apartment building located within the roughest industrial district across the entire city, where crime rates remain significantly high. The thoroughly disgraced woman now survives solely by performing exhausting physical manual labor jobs at a local manufacturing plant, simply to afford her most basic daily necessities like food plus electricity. Most importantly, I successfully won the grueling legal battle to obtain full permanent guardianship over Tyler through the extensive family court system following a highly emotional child custody hearing. The presiding magistrate explicitly recognized my stable financial status alongside my genuine emotional dedication toward securing a significantly better future for the incredibly vulnerable young boy. Earning official protective custody finally allowed me to provide the deeply traumatized child with a genuinely safe household environment, completely free from constant psychological anxiety or unexpected late-night evictions. I happily enrolled him in a highly prestigious local school program while actively ensuring his daily academic life remained entirely unaffected by his highly toxic biological mother. Tyler quickly flourished under my consistent adult supervision, successfully joining the neighborhood baseball team, while gradually forgetting the miserable nomadic existence he previously endured alongside Shannon. Every single desperate attempt she subsequently made to initiate contact through pathetic handwritten apology letters or blocked mobile phone calls was immediately intercepted before reaching the outdoor trash bin. I permanently severed this incredibly poisonous blood relationship without feeling any lingering emotional guilt to successfully build a peaceful new life centered entirely around raising my newly adopted nephew. The agonizing memories of her ultimate betrayal gradually faded away into nothingness as our peaceful home finally regained its rightful atmosphere of absolute security plus unconditional familial love. Before wrapping up today's story, I want to share my personal perspective regarding this heartbreaking familial betrayal. This real-life situation powerfully demonstrates that sharing the exact same biological bloodline never justifies tolerating malicious manipulation or outright financial theft. Misplaced sympathy toward incredibly lazy or deceitful relatives will eventually transform you into a vulnerable victim inside your own private sanctuary. I strongly believe that establishing impenetrable steel boundaries remains absolutely necessary to permanently protect your hard-earned assets from greedy individuals. Cutting off a toxic family member is undeniably painful, yet it often serves as the only viable method to save yourself while simultaneously protecting innocent children from further psychological destruction. If you were actually in Brenda's difficult position, would you also testify in court to strip your own sibling of their parental rights? If anyone possesses a different approach regarding this devastating family conflict, please share your personal opinions down in the comments section below, because we highly value our community discussions. Thank you so much for dedicating your valuable time to accompany us until the very end of this turbulent emotional journey.